Welcome into episode 178. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at by CA Simmons, and at Night Sports Now. Christian, how are you?
Doing well, I guess.
Does it feel like the last week of the regular season?
I mean, yeah, it does. Does it not to you?
I don't know. It kind of doesn't, but I guess it probably will, as we get later in the week and it starts to feel more like Thanksgiving week.
I'm thinking about how this time last year, UCF was coming off losing to Navy, and we'd gone in the span of a week from believing that they were destined to win the Cotton Bowl to not even sure if they were going to qualify for the AAC title game. And I'm thinking, it could be worse. It could be last year. I think I'm in a better
suddenly I don't feel
year.
as bad. I don't feel as bad anymore. Although UCF is not yet bowl eligible, so I guess it should feel worse, but it doesn't.
And this time 2 years ago, they just lost to SMU in a blowout after we thought that they were on a hot streak, and we're gonna. I'm sensing a trend over the last few years of UCF football.
It's not fun. We will get to our UCF and Houston preview, but we need to get to our 5-star review question first. This one comes from Terrence, and it's an interesting one because I think I know my answer, but I also at the same time I think I know my answer. So here we go. All things the same, and forgetting preseason projections, would you rather 1, lose to Baylor, the worst loss in Bounce House history, and beat Oklahoma State, the best win in Bounce House history, or number 2, beat Baylor and erase the worst loss and lose to Oklahoma State, the unexpected/projected loss? Which way do you lean on this?
First off, I don't believe that the Baylor loss is the worst in Bounce House history. I think starting there would be good. I don't even know if it's top 2. I would put Furman ahead of it. I would possibly put FIU in 2015 ahead of it, and I would definitely put USF in 2015 ahead of it. So I wouldn't call it the worst.
Do you not put Navy ahead of it from last year?
No, because it's the way, it's not just the L, right? It's how you take it. And the Navy game was just a mess. They were up 35-7, and it was this big celebration moment, and then they lost the game. But I don't know where I land. Well, yeah, I do. That's a lie. I absolutely know where I land. I'm not trading the Oklahoma State game for anything, because at the end of the day, Baylor's gone on to be terrible. And I wish we lived in a world where UCF could have won both of those, but beating a top 15 team, a top 15 team that went on to beat Houston and is marching to the Big 12 title game and might win the Big 12, and beating them 45-3 in the space game. I'm not I wish they didn't lose to Baylor, and I'm going to be pissed about that literally until my dying day, but I'm not going to trade the Oklahoma State game to get back a win over what's going to be a 4-8 Baylor team, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for the moment, it would have been great because it was the first home game in the Big 12 and of what it was supposed to be. And I think, like you mentioned, we've talked about, I think, every podcast since that game happened, we will talk about and remember the Baylor game and be mad about it forever. But I think you also said it on a recent, might have been after the game against Oklahoma State. Maybe it was last week when we did our things we missed. But you mentioned something about it being UCF's signature moment or signature win from their first Big 12 season.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's more valuable. So I would agree with you, although I will continue to hate and lament that loss to Baylor forever and wish I could erase it. I wish I could do whatever I could to erase it, although I guess I would not give up the Oklahoma State game. Because also just, I don't know, that day, I don't want to say it outweighs it in terms of experiencing it and being there for both of them, because I don't know that the joy I felt that day really was the same as the despair that I felt after the Baylor game, just because it was just a horrible thing to be there and witness. But it was still a fun, it was that day was very memorable and one of the top days in UCF's history, especially in the regular season. So
I guess my question is, 10 years from now, which would you be talking about more? The time that UCF blew out Baylor in their first ever Big 12 game, or the time that UCF took down the number 15 team 45-3 in their space uniforms? I feel like the number 15 team 45-3 that's the one we'll be talking about, especially if Oklahoma State continues to do what they're doing.
And I think it was less, I didn't even really look at it that way. I looked at it as which would you erase that awful loss? I'm not even looking at it what would a Baylor win have done, which really nothing, but not nothing, they'd be bowl eligible already. But what would that game have done compared to the win against Oklahoma State? But it's also I don't know.
Yeah.
To not have lived through that game would have been nice, but
it's annoying. Like I said, it's one of those things where, and we've mentioned on every podcast, and this week it's especially poignant talking about the Baylor game, because once again, if they had just not blown a 35-7 lead, this is a totally stress-free week. We're going in we're bowl eligible. We're sitting at 6-5. Let's go try to get 7. Done. Nothing to worry about. Yeah. And to think that, I mean, God, they would have clinched bowl eligibility against Oklahoma State if they beaten Baylor. That's the one game that, and it's one of those things. I don't know why we were talking about this every week, but it's just because I'm literally never going to get over it. It was that bad. And I think part of what makes it so bad is like every year there's a game or two where you look at and you're like, if you could just flip this result, season would have been different. It's like, it's not about flipping a result. It's that the game was over. Like the stands had emptied. The game was done. They had a giant lead and they lost, and it just changed the season. And I'm never going to get over it. But yeah, Oklahoma State, I'm taking that. That's obviously the best moment of the season, whether they beat Houston or not, which Jesus, they need to beat Houston. But yeah, I'm not giving up Oklahoma State.
If they don't beat Houston, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
It's going to not be a fun post-game pod. Let me tell you that right now.
Well, I won't be there either way.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think it's solo. I think it's a solo pod for me post-game.
Yeah,
because Bailey Bailey's just not as committed to the podcast as I am. So
that's fair. Yeah,
he has a legitimate reason.
I have Thanksgiving obligations, so I don't even call them obligations. I guess. Why do people say that? Why did I just say that?
So can I actually
obligations? Yeah. What is it?
I'm going to have an even dumber conversation now. Let's dig into your personal life for a second, because I'm curious about this. Let's do it. No, let's do it anyway. Who does Thanksgiving on Saturday? Like, I'm actually confused about this.
Oh, it's because, I don't remember how it originated. I think it's because on Thursday, my girlfriend's aunt is going to be in Chicago visiting her daughter for Thanksgiving. And so they wanted to do it all together. And I think, and I don't know, it might've been to accommodate me also at the time. Because of, we usually do it my Thanksgiving lunch. It's weird because my family, we do Thanksgiving lunch with my dad's side of the family and Thanksgiving lunch with my mom's side of the family, like because no one has a big enough house to have everyone over at the same place. But I don't know. Why are we getting into this? Like we have. Like,
I didn't think you were going to give me the whole family tree breakdown. I was just curious if there was some reason behind it. I liked that I said, I was like, who does it on a Saturday? And you're like, well, it was to accommodate me. Not very accommodating since there's a UCF game that day.
Well, I wasn't going to be like, I think part of it was so that her aunt could be there and so that I could be there. And then I wasn't going to then be like, actually, I gotta sit. I have to go to Orlando to watch the UCF game against Houston. So yeah.
Just be like me and have no family in the state of Florida. And you don't have to worry about things like this.
No,
but anyway, it'll be a solo. It'll be a solo post-game pod for me, and I will. We'll see if they lose.
I feel like a burden has been lifted from me because of that. Like I'm feeling I'm going to enjoy my Saturday either way more.
Are you going to be watching the game still? Or are you going to miss the game?
I'll see most of the game. I think. I'm not really sure how timeline works out. I love how we've probably spent like 3 to 4 minutes on this now. But yeah, I think I'll be able to watch most of the game. Probably the drive over there will cut into it. I don't know. We'll see. I'll keep track.
I will say that
I'm incapable of like just ignoring it completely because when I was on vacation during the Kansas game and I didn't watch a second of that game, but I was continuing to keep up with it for most of it. So
one of the most frustrating things in my life, and this is I shouldn't have even phrased it that way because this is gonna sound so like pathetically first world, but I was so frustrated when I accidentally booked a cruise the week of the spring game and I couldn't watch the spring game. Like that's literally like the most awful first world thing ever, that I opened that with one of the most frustrating things in my life, but I was so annoyed on the cruise. One of the most frustrating
things of your life.
I go for hyperbole, guys. It's fine. Like it's great. I had a good cruise and I got a lot of spring game updates on Twitter, so it was no issue at all. But yeah.
Oh boy. All right, let's move on to UCF and Houston, a game that apparently I may or may not be watching all of and won't be on the post-game podcast for the reasons just stated. Let's get into it. UCF has to win this game to go to a bowl, which
they do.
I'm scared, and I shouldn't be because Houston's bad, but I don't know. UCF could just be UCF. I don't know. I feel like the vibes are a little scary.
Can I throw you a stat from Matt Murschel that he posted earlier?
Yes.
He tweeted that UCF's all the way up to 13.5 point favorite. They opened as a 9-point favorite. And Matt Murschel pointed out that it is just the third time this season the Knights have been double-digit favorites, and the other 2 games were Kent State and Villanova. So Houston's bad, which is just like, I don't know. Like I said, this is one of those ones where gut instinct right now. I don't think Houston can hang. I think that this will be, I don't think UCF's going to go win 42-14 or something like that, but I think it will be a largely comfortable win if I had to guess. But it's UCF. I thought that Navy last year would be a largely comfortable win. I thought that East Carolina would be a largely comfortable win. So there's just always that, we have that thing now where it's just, no matter what we think, we just don't know.
You famously thought that Navy would be a comfortable win if the Tulane podcast was anything to go by.
It's our worst podcast we've ever done. I'm not even joking. I literally was like, you were bringing up like matchups and stuff, and I was arguing with you. I was like, why do you care? Like, it's not even like they're just going to go win. Why are we talking about this game? And then UCF lost. So that was. I also picked that week to declare on Twitter that UCF was better than FSU, and then they immediately lost to Navy. And like that was like one of
that was a rough week for you.
It was a bad week. That was like the second worst I've been like attacked on Twitter. First being Purdue in 2019 was when all the FSU fans found that tweet and were very mean to me, but I got over it. I was okay.
Wow, I had something else to say, but I forgot what it was. I think it was just kind of what we just mentioned earlier with the Baylor thing. It's like it would be nice to have this over with, because like they should win this game, but a disaster could happen and that would keep them from bowl eligibility. When if a disaster would have happened in this game otherwise, they would have already had 6 wins. You would have been annoyed, but you'd be like, all right, whatever, 6 and 6, 7 and 5, what's the difference? One game is the difference. But the other thing I was going to say actually was, we talked about this on the post-game podcast after Texas Tech. It's that Houston doesn't have bowl eligibility to play for. Their coach is fighting with fans, allegedly, and is just also getting on radio shows and questioning UCF space ties for like a week before that game even happened. It was before the Oklahoma State game. So I just don't feel like this is a game UCF should lose at all. Like, it should be comfortable. But,
I don't totally buy in. I don't totally buy into the concept that like, oh, because Houston isn't bowl eligible, they're not going to care. Like, it's still a football game and this is still a team. Like, I think they're going to care very much and give it their all. But I do think that there's something to be said about a matchup where Houston is just playing to play and UCF needs to win this game. I don't know. I do think there's a little bit of something to that.
Yeah, no, I think there should be. We'll jump into our key stats.
Let's do it.
One of them, actually, the first one is regarding bowl eligibility. If UCF wins this game, it would be the latest that they've ever clinched bowl eligibility.
We actually skipped the thing I wanted to talk about. Did we talk about how they're probably going to be the only bowl eligible team of the new 4? Did you say that?
No, but I was going to talk about that here, I guess. Sort of. Same thing, but what you just said.
I was just following the outline you made. But that's one of the things that I'm not. I don't know. Twitter UCF vibes have been bad on Twitter again, which I feel like is not a surprise since they lost a game, and I feel like it's just the way it goes. But it's why I'm not in freakout mode that a lot of people are in, is because it would be one thing like when you just look at the situation very from UCF's perspective and say, hey, UCF is 5-6. They lost all these close games. I'm pissed about that. We were undefeated 5 years ago, and we should be doing better than this. Like, screw this staff, get them all out of here. Like, okay, like I see when you're in that narrow perspective, but Houston's 4-7. Cincinnati's 3-8. BYU's 5-6, and they have, who are they playing? They're playing someone they're not going to beat.
Oklahoma State, I think.
Right, they're playing Oklahoma State, who they're probably not going to beat, and it's on the road to Oklahoma State. And UCF is, of the new 4 schools, the only one who's really in good position to go to a bowl here, and the only one likely to go to a bowl at all. And I think that if that does come to pass, and these 4 schools all join the conference, and UCF is the only one who even made it to a bowl, I think it's a little difficult to be that worked up about it if you're a fan. Like, you can be worked up about individual games. We're pissed about Baylor. We're always going to be pissed about Baylor. But it's hard for me to justify the way some people are reacting on social media. And I think part of it, and this has always been a thing for me to like think about too, with when things are going UCF's way, is it's a question to ask yourself is, does anyone outside of the immediate UCF community think UCF is having a bad year or think Gus Malzahn should be fired? And the answer is no. So when you look at it that way, it'd be one thing if all the other new teams were doing great, but UCF's literally having the best season of all 4. So I think at some point we're just gonna have to accept this was a really, really big jump, and UCF's doing what they can with what they have right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it might be the intangible things where, I don't know. It'd be interesting to have a conversation with some of these people that are like that, like firmly like get him out of here. But I think it's almost like, well, at least when I've approached it as like, yeah, maybe I wouldn't be that sad if he was gone. I've looked at it as like, it's not about this year, although some of the individual results were annoying. It's more like, what is like, where are they going to get to with him as their head coach? And that's a different conversation.
That is a different conversation.
Then they're only at 5 wins right now in their first Big 12 season. Get him out. It's more, what's the future like? And who knows? Like that all could change. We got the recruiting's going well, all that stuff. But even with all that, that's a whole different conversation of recruiting's going well, but will it matter because coaching and all that?
And to play devil's advocate, because I know that there are people who are just like screaming in their cars right now as I'm saying this stuff, is I think that the point some people have made is that UCF had the roster to go like 8-4, and the staff screwed that up. And I'm not saying that's wrong because they lost close games. So obviously they could have. They never were going to be 9-3 or 10-2 guys, but they could have maybe gotten to 8-4 if like a few plays break their way. We know that. But at the same time, we're now up to, in all of modern college football history, 6 teams have moved from G5 to P5, and the best any of them have done is 7-5, and 3 of them apparently are not going to make a bowl. So it's just, there's no history to back up that belief, is why it's hard for me to get too worked up about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, but it would, no matter how you look at it, it's like if they get to a bowl, and this is what it was all offseason was, yeah, hopefully they win 7, hopefully they win 8. I don't think they will. They could win 6 or 7, just get to a bowl. That's my goal. That rhymed. I didn't mean to do that.
Get to a bowl. That is my goal.
That's been the whole thing all along, and how they've gotten there has been extremely frustrating. But if they finish 6-6, like you said this on the last game, the last post game podcast, like the end of the season, your record, what goes into the record books is your record rather than not how they got there. And so, yeah, get to a bowl game and you're fine. Like everything that, well, I don't know about everything, but a lot of the things that I laid out, everything that I wanted before the season, they got there in the end, I guess. It's been really annoying how they've done it, but they got to win the game to get there. And if they finish 5-7, it's one game, but if they finish 5-7, I get to feel like it's a complete failure.
If they don't get to a bowl, which was the goal, does Gus deserve a lump of coal?
Yes.
And should he be banished to the North Pole?
I was going to say jail, but sure.
I agree. It's the one game swing that's just crazy to me. And that's what I hate about it coming down to this final game, which it's weird that's never happened before. Like I was kind of surprised when you told me that stat, but I guess it adds up as that.
Hopefully it's right.
It is. I can't think of a time because have they only ever even been 6-6 once in 2016?
That sounds possible.
I can't think of another time.
Correct.
I think they were 8-4 in 2009. I can't think of another time. But it's weird. Like we've talked about, there's only 12 games in the college football season, so you get wild one game record swings. But just 6-6, you did it. You went to a bowl. You achieved your goals for the season. 5-7, we're furious. Like it's the season was a failure.
I mean, you probably you absolutely know more about this than me. But the whole, if there's not enough bowl eligible teams and they're 5-7, they're like in a good position with their academic progress rate to still maybe go to a bowl. I don't want that to happen. If they
not
don't get
even
a 6th
something
win,
I've thought to look into.
If they don't get a 6th win, I don't want them to go to a bowl. I think they should turn it down.
It's interesting because there are not going to be enough bowl eligible teams this year, which pretty rarely happens. But well, first off, it's going to be a little because once there are not enough, then Jacksonville State and James Madison become eligible, so they'll fill the first 2. We're not even doing that conversation. We're not doing that.
No, I say that because I think I forgot who it was. I wish I could credit them, but someone pointed it out earlier this week that of like the teams that are on the fringes of bowl, I think there's only one of them that's ahead of UCF in terms of the whole academic progress rate tiebreaker. I don't want it to happen. I want them to turn on the bowl. They won't because they want the practices and all that. But
look, I'll say it right now.
Would be annoyed.
And you can quote me and like play this audio clip if I try to backtrack. If they lose the Houston game and go 5-7, but are still invited to a bowl, the season was still a failure. That doesn't count. Like I get they're going to a bowl and that's great, and I'm happy for the practices, but like that's a failure. You went 5-7. Like
that would open them up to the very probably large possibility of an extremely gross 5-8 record.
5-8. We saw that a couple. Was it Rutgers a couple years ago?
I think it might have been.
Yeah,
but if they go 5-7, then lose the bowl game and finish 5-8. Oh,
UCF's all about gross records. Going 9-5 and 5-8 in back-to-back years would be just such a. I've talked about before. I know I talked about this at length last year. I just hate the record 9-5. Like it just looks awful when you see it. I hate it. But also weird. Like in my head, 11-3 looks better than 12-2, which makes no sense. Like I don't
know about that.
It's wrong. Like obviously 12-2 is better than 11-3, but like. It's just like subconscious when I see 11-3, I'm like, oh, good year. And when I see 12-2, I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, I don't know why 11-3 takes precedent for me. It's the dumbest thing in the world, but for some reason it just is. But yeah, it's a failure. The season is a failure if they lose to Houston. I don't care. You can't. Everything's forgivable if you get to a bowl because that was always the goal. God, I hate that I'm still rhyming. I hate this. But if you lose to Houston, we're done. That season failed.
What's insane? They could beat Houston, be 6-6, go to a bowl, lose, finish 6-7. They could lose to Houston, go 5-7, make a bowl where like this is a failure, and then they win the bowl. They're still 6-7. They could finish 6-7. In I don't care
ways. If they lose to Houston, I'm out.
Yeah, one of them is loser way of backing into a bowl. I don't want it. Which is funny to call the loser way of getting to a bowl is an academic thing, but whatever. That's not what we're talking about. Have you
processed that if they beat Houston, which is expected, and then win the bowl game, they will have finished the season on a 4-1 run? Who can be mad about that? Not me.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah.
Look, honestly, after the West Virginia, I will give UCF credit for this, that after the West Virginia game, we literally laughed out loud at the idea of them finishing 3-1, which is what they'd have to do to get to a bowl. I mean, we both said that's ridiculous. You've seen this team. This team's not going 3-1. Looks like they're going to do it. So that is pretty crazy that we're on the precipice of that, given where they were a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I already read the first key stat. Yeah, we just talked about it kind of with both of it. So we'll jump into the second one, which is the actual game stuff. Basically, UCF needs to run the ball because Houston's run defense is 91st in the country. I have the stats here for the other three Big 12 defenses ranked lower than that the UCF has faced. So they had number 93 was Cincinnati, who was giving up 164.6 yards per game. UCF ran for 228. Then it was Oklahoma State at 107. They were giving up 176 roughly per game. UCF ran for 293. Can't read my own handwriting. And then Baylor was 113. They were averaging 179 given up per game. UCF ran for 235. So just run the ball. Well, other thing I want to mention going down the list, UCF's run defense is number 123. So
I will say, though, something interesting about those three games is that those were also, without a doubt, UCF's three best Big 12 performances. They obviously destroyed Oklahoma State. They beat Cincinnati on the road. And if you turned off the TV in the third quarter, they blew out Baylor. So that it's encouraging. Like, that stat made me feel more encouraged than anything else, because this does feel, I mean, I was just looking at RJ Harvey in those games. For Cincy, he had 164 yards and 3 touchdowns. Oklahoma State, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns. Baylor, he went for 95 yards. Johnny also had 105 yards. This is a game where, we'll see about the defense. That's a different conversation, but the offense should largely be able to just do what they always do and just run at will. And it's hard for UCF to lose when RJ Harvey gets going like that. They've done it this year, don't get me wrong, but they've done it against better teams than this.
Well, what's interesting too is, and this is probably something worth talking about because our other stat is also based on the Houston defense, but I just mentioned how UCF's run defense is 123. Houston doesn't run the ball very well ever. This whole season, they have not been able to run the ball, and it's been all on their quarterback, Donovan Smith. So, and then as I've done around the Big 12 thing, it just seems like he'll fairly often throw like 3 or 4 touchdowns, but they'll lose like 55-30, something like that. So they're going to try to throw the ball, and I think that's something that UCF is better suited to stop. I'm not going to say they're guaranteed to stop it, but I think they're better suited to stop that than a great rushing attack, and Houston doesn't have a great rushing attack. So another thing that falls in UCF's favor.
It's kind of funny how in past seasons, depending on the opponent, we've looked up all kinds of stats to try to get a feel of what the game's going to be. And every single week this season, it's just been, how well do they run the ball? And how well do they defend the run? And that's the story, because UCF, it's actually really funny that UCF runs the ball incredibly well and also can't defend the run at all. But that's been the whole season. So anything can happen in college football, but on paper, which is what you want to look at, there's just not a super viable path to Houston winning this game, especially with it being at home for UCF. If it was on the road, which, vicious environment, Houston Stadium, you could maybe talk about it a little more. I know teams play better at home, but I don't know, man. I feel like I'm jinxing it, but I'm not seeing an easy path to Houston winning unless they just start hitting a bunch of big plays. Unless their quarterback just gets hot and is chucking it. I don't know. I don't see a super easy path here for them.
Then it turns into a shootout, and UCF can still be in that scenario win in a shootout. I don't know.
We've said that a couple times. Games that are like gearing up to be shootouts, and it was West Virginia and Texas Tech, and the offense went cold in both those situations. So I don't know. Maybe this isn't a shootout team.
We talked about Oklahoma State being a shootout, and it was on one side.
It was on one side. But honestly, and I don't know if that's a play calling thing or what, but it does feel like every time this year where it kind of gets into the mode of, okay, this is going to be two teams that are really just going to uncork it, a lot of offense. UCF just kind of stalls. I don't know what that's about, but it's happened multiple times this year, so I feel like we can say it's a thing now.
I think we've reached 4 podcasts in a row where I've realized halfway through the podcast that I didn't have a score prediction. So that'll be fun. I have the other things, but that's it.
Well, don't worry. If UCF loses, you don't have to worry about it again for like 10 months. So 9 months.
I don't know. This could be our last game preview until next. What's the game? Do we even know the game yet or no?
New Hampshire.
Oh, the New Hampshire.
August 31st?
I don't know. Doesn't feel like a real date or real time.
Doesn't feel like a real team.
Far in advance. It doesn't. We'll still go out and lose.
August 31st. How awesome is that I knew that off the top of my head that they play New Hampshire August 31st, 2024.
I have questions about you now. Well, not now. I think I always have, but yeah.
They play Sam Houston the week after. So
yeah, I didn't know that.
Crazy double.
I just didn't really know the order, honestly.
That's such a stupid start to a season. Like we're going to know nothing about that team for 2 games. That's not fun at all. That's going to be just enough time for Gus to put all of his eggs in the basket of a quarterback who's not good because he balled out against 2 bad teams.
Then it'll be a Big 12 game because the other non-conference game, Florida, isn't until like October, right?
Yeah, Florida is
10-7?
10:05, October 5th.
Oh, I'm wrong. Okay.
You know what I don't love about the really tough Big 12 conference is UCF in the middle of their conference slate going to play in Gainesville. I just don't love anything about that, but it's fine.
That has like written all over it. And I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't actually be upset if this happened, I don't think, but I would the week after, the week it happened, I wouldn't be. But they could they're going to go to the Swamp and they're going to be like all like fired up for it. They're going to like somehow beat Florida in the Swamp. I don't know why I said somehow. Florida's not that good, but also they're going to be fine. They're going to be like talent wise, they're going to be tough to play against. They go and beat Florida and they come home, they're playing, I don't know, Houston next week, and Houston's like 1-4 and Houston's going to beat them. That's going to happen.
Well, they don't play Houston in 2024, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, but, whatever bottom of the Big 12 team, insert that team here.
Colorado, I don't know.
Sure, I mean
it is, but have you processed that? In all likelihood, like I don't think this is a stretch to say at all. If UCF goes and wins that game, UCF is probably going to end Billy Napier's career as UCF as a Florida's head coach, right? Like they'd fire him for that if they lost UCF.
Probably.
That'd be cool. Probably. That'd be fun. I'd be okay with them losing to 1-3 Arizona the week after that at home if they get Florida's coach fired. I think that'd be funny.
It would be funny. Be good for the memes. Key stat number 3. Houston has allowed 30 plus points in 5 of their 6 Big 12 losses. The only one they didn't was against Cincinnati.
Who's bad at football?
They lost to Cincinnati, so like that almost counts as a 6th one. Just because anyway you lose to Cincinnati is bad. Says a person who is a fan of the team that beat them by 2 points. Almost lost to them. But still, their defense not very good. I think they just gave up 43 points to Oklahoma State. I don't know. Everything about this game, and this is why I think it's fair that we've said it. Everything feels like it's lining up for UCF to just do what they need to do, take care of business, get to a bowl. But there's just the history of things they've done, where in the past, all things have lined up in the past, and UCF hasn't taken advantage of it. So it's still like one of those things where you feel fine about it, but there's still that lingering fear, where it's just, I don't know, it could be a disaster.
It's one of those things where the game might be wrapping up Saturday. UCF's up like 38-7. And it's like, yeah, we should have known this is what was going to happen. Or it can be one of those situations where the offense goes dead and Houston decides to just run it outside and UCF can't stop it. I don't know. I don't want to just echo what you're saying, but I agree. UCF should win this game pretty easily. Houston's pretty bad and they have nothing left to play for. It's college football. Crazy stuff happens. I can't even count how many times over the last even just 5-10 years, I've thought UCF is perfectly fine heading into a game and they lose it. Not outside of the Gus era. Tulsa in 2019 stands out. Literally the first 4 games of 2015. I mean, 2014 against UConn is one of those ones we definitely don't talk about enough. I mean, weird stuff happens in college football, so I just don't know. But they should win this game easily. We should not have to worry for long on Saturday, but I just don't know.
So with all that, how can UCF win the game?
Can I tell you something really funny?
What?
I just realized I didn't make a score prediction.
What? You just clowned me for it.
I think I thought of one and then didn't write it down. I don't remember what it was. I'm so sorry. This is very professional podcasting. But
we're not there yet. We're at the other
You're
part.
Right.
Did you do that part?
I did do this part.
Did you do that part of your homework?
I did do this part of my homework. This podcast does feel like I do get the homework feel sometimes because I don't know. I was going to say this shouldn't surprise you, but I don't think people know my work habits or anything. But this podcast is always I wait until the absolute last minute to get my thoughts together for the podcast. The stats we come up with pretty far in advance because I really like looking up stats, but the actual writing up my notes and stuff, as soon as it's 4, I'm like, okay, it's because, we record at 5. You guys don't know that. Yeah. As soon as it's 4, I'm like, okay, it's time to spend the hour getting this all together. But I have for how UCF can win. I think the run game just pops off and they can't contain RJ Harvey. John Rice Plumlee does some stuff with his legs and they pretty much just run all over Houston. It's not super exciting football or crazy fun, throwing it through the air, putting up a billion points, but Houston just can't contain them, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as simple as run the ball well and defend the pass. That's it. Also, cut out the damn penalties. That's part of what happened against Texas Tech was just the drives would drives would just get killed after a couple big plays, or just not even big plays. They just get a first down and then bring it back for a hold or a false start or whatever it is, and it's just one of those things that's how you lose to inferior teams. I'm not saying Texas Tech is an inferior team, but if they go out and they rack up 90 penalty yards against Houston, that's 90 free yards you've given up. So I mean, that's something that they can't do if they're going to win the game. So
I don't want to I don't
Oh,
want
go
to
ahead.
pick on a specific player, but I'd love someone to go find the stats of how many times Tylen Grable's been called for holding in his UCF career, because it feels like, am I like wrong in saying that?
I
It
don't
just feels
know.
like it's constant.
I don't know if it's something that I noticed until this past week. Like I feel like his name was called a lot this
I
past
feel
week,
like
but
I've noticed it going back to last year.
yeah,
Maybe
no,
I'm totally wrong. I'd have to
I
go
don't
look.
think I have, but
Okay, I'll
I
take that
also
back then in
just
case I'm wrong.
no. I mean, you're probably right. I don't know. I don't know. I'm
Because it's
not
also like
confident
the
enough in
hold
it.
he got called for against Texas Tech early on. It wasn't even one of those things where it's like, oh, come on, ref, like let him play. It was
Yeah.
like he was just straight up like smothering a guy for no reason. It's
Well, that's the
just
thing. I remember. I think I remember that one, or maybe it was another one that he did. I don't know, but I remember feeling like, all right, guys, like the refs need to stop throwing so many flags. Like it's just both on both teams are just like slowing the game down, and there's no rhythm to this game. And then they showed the replay of it, and I was like, all right, that one they do kind of have to call,
yeah, they kind of have
but
to. I know
but
that I
some of
know
them I
that
was just
linemen
like,
are pretty much taught to try to get away with holding, but like there's trying to get away with holding, and then there's just literally grabbing a guy and just like bear
yeah,
hugging him and being like, no, you're not going anywhere. Like that's like what do you expect the refs to do in that situation? I don't get
yeah.
it, but whatever.
So all of that, how can UCF lose the game?
I think it's two things. I think it's if the offense stalls, like we've seen a couple times, including last weekend, and I think it's if Houston starts hitting big plays. I think that's how Houston wins. Is if the quarterback gets hot, they throw downfield a few times. Because I don't think they're going to be able to just. Could be really wrong. I don't think they're one of the teams that's just going to be able to drive, just take it to UCF and hold on to the
Yeah,
ball. But they can be explosive at times. So if that happens and UCF can't respond, that's how I think they lose.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is like the penalties for me, and then also kind of. I think I said this. I don't remember what game it might have been, but it's one of those where if UCF lets them hang around for long enough, like that's how they could lose it is down the
Mm-hmm.
stretch because we've seen UCF in the second half of games, either whether it's stalling on offense, giving up big plays on defense, needing a stop and not being able to get it, whatever it is, like it could go the wrong way if it's a close game late, and you just don't want that to be a possibility. Like you don't want that to happen. So put it away early and you're fine. But if it's down the stretch, I'll be scared.
Yeah, I agree with that. And another factor I'm going to throw in potentially for how UCF can lose, even though this is more of an intangible thing, is I'm curious to see the crowd. I'm not necessarily like expecting it to be bad, but the Black Friday weekend crowds are always tough for some teams, because a lot of the students are going to be gone. Like I think the student sections will be bad. I think it would be a lot to ask them
Yeah.
to not be. Also, that's one thing that's been changing over the years as UCF's grown as a university is like it's been a while, but as recently as probably 10, 15 years ago, the student section was like in the early days of the bounce house was largely local kids. And I know UCF is a lot more diversified now. It's kids from all over the country. So I think that kind of hurts the ability to fill the student section. And also, I said this way in the offseason. I'm curious to see if it plays out. Part of the reason that UCF would always have a good crowd for that final home game is because it was USF.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a rivalry game. And, you get up for that. And it's Houston. It's a team UCF's been playing for 20 years and no one cares about. So I'm just curious if there are people who would have gone if this were USF, but I'm talking more casual fans here, but who see it's some opponent they don't care about and don't bother with it.
Or even if it was like keep the opponents the same or keep the teams the same, but raise their level of records. Like just
Right.
if it was a
Right.
big game, like, and I know it was probably both in 2017, but like that was a game on Black Friday that I drove back from Tampa for that 2017 game, which I probably would have done it anyway. But that was well, depending on what polls you go to, it's a top 25 game. It was the biggest game of the year at the time.
Yeah.
So if this game was, I don't know, I don't really know what would it have to be? Because
I don't
like
know.
not like if it's two 9-win teams, like I don't think even like those are both really good seasons for probably for UCF and Houston in the Big 12. But like I don't think the casual fans can be like, oh, like which one's gonna get 10 wins? Like if it was like
No, that absolutely
maybe
would have been, because the one thing you
you think
don't
so?
realize about casual fans is how much things are impacted by if there's a number next to the team's name.
Yeah,
And if they both had 9 wins, there'd be numbers next to the name. So it becomes a
that's
big
true.
game, whether it's. I'm also curious as far as casual fans, how much of them know or care about the whole bowl eligibility being on the line. I know it's hard sometimes for like the folks who listen to this podcast to understand that most of the fan base is. I feel like I'm well prepared for this because I have a lot of friends who are like very casual UCF fans. Like they know
Yeah.
Gus Malzahn, and they know John Rice Plumlee, and they know whether the team won or lost that last weekend, and that's more or less what they know. And it's like for that group, it's like is the whole idea of UCF's they gotta win this one to get to a bowl. It's a big game. Does that even register, or is it just like UCF's 5-6? What's Houston? Oh, they're bad too. I don't know if I'm gonna get out there
Yeah.
that. I feel like I can see that happening too. So I'm curious. Maybe I'll be surprised. I've been surprised a
I'm
couple times by
curious.
the crowd this season.
I'm curious too. No one's bought my tickets so far, so I don't know if that's anything to go
Oh,
by. But
worried now. Alarm
yeah,
bells going off.
I've lowered them down pretty low too, so we'll see.
Would
We'll
you
see.
mind saying what they cost right now?
I put them. Shoot, I don't remember if I raised them back up earlier because what the section I've seen people list them in my section for $55, which seems crazy. I lifted them or I lowered them all the way down to $15. yesterday.
Worried.
And
I'm worried
when I
that
checked
$15
earlier, they
tickets
were
are not going.
still there. I'm just trying to get anything for him at this point. And so lowering him even more, but we'll see. Let's get your score prediction.
34-17 UCF.
Nice. Is that the one that you remembered, or did you remember it? Or
I have no idea what I was going to put down originally, but I feel good about that one. I like it.
34-17?
Correct.
All right, I went 38-21. 38-21 UCF.
I like that one. That's a good one.
It feels like a game they should win comfortably. We've talked about it. I mean, it's one of those, and I just don't. I know they gave up only 3 points against Oklahoma State, but I'm never with this defense going to say, oh, they're going to hold an opposing team. Like even like what I say, 21. 21 feels sort of low, but it's also 3 touchdowns. So I don't know. I'm not comfortable saying like they're going to win like 38-10 or like 7. Just doesn't feel like the defense.
Relying on the concept that if UCF goes up early, then Houston's going to have to give up on the run entirely, and that's really how teams beat UCF. So that's where I see them not necessarily scoring a lot of points. But I don't know. It could be one of the games where the defense just kind of falls apart. And another big note for this game is it's senior night. It will be very interesting to see who was walking and who was not, because there are some question marks there. So
it's always fun. Like I don't know. Usually, I think last year, didn't they put out a graphic? I think the night before, that we could all dissect. They were like, these are the seniors, so we'll see if that comes out on Friday. And just keeping an eye on who walks out there for the ceremonies before the game, which will be probably starting at like 11:30.
So I'm probably reading way too much into a graphic, because UCF posted a graphic for today, but there's no way it was exhaustive. Like there were just players I know are out of eligibility who were missing. But like, because I texted you and I'm like, no Traymon on this graphic. And then I looked up Traymon's eligibility. He's definitely out of eligibility as far as I can tell. He's played 5 full seasons, including COVID. So I had no red shirt or anything, but he's not on the graphic. And then but then we point out like Tylen Grable's not on the graphic, but I don't know. I think we're reading way too much into the freaking graphic. So we'll wait and see who comes out.
Yeah, no, I think because originally I was looking at it, and then I think we both were just kind of like, no, the graphic doesn't mean anything. But of course we're going to look at it and try to read into it if we can. But like I just mentioned, that like those pregame ceremonies are going to end up being probably like 11:25, 11:30 in the morning, because it is a noon kick. We're jumping into the football news now. This was set for a noon kick on FS1, and I think you put out a counter on how many FS1 games UCF had compared to everyone else, and I don't remember exact numbers, but I think it was like a pretty big disparity, wasn't it? And they have 7.
Yeah, UCF had 7. No one else of the new teams had more than 4. I actually thought it was really interesting because I got really into it, and I was looking at like how many of the new 4, like how often have they appeared on a major network or ESPN and stuff. And it was interesting to see how UCF stacked up. So UCF obviously had 3 games that were on a major network. I'm totally derailing the podcast now, or ESPN.
No,
they had a game on Fox, a game on ABC, and a game on ESPN. Who of the new 4 do you think led the pack with major network plus ESPN appearances?
BYU.
8 of BYU's 12 games were on a major network or ESPN. Now, the reason for that is that
slot.
It's the time slot. ESPN loves them for that 10:30 slot or their late game slot, so they got a lot from that. But their UCF was 4th to last in the Big 12 when it came to major network and ESPN slots. Can you name the 3 teams who had fewer than them? UCF had 3.
UCF had 3. The 3 teams had fewer than them?
Yeah.
Iowa State.
No. Iowa State had 5. They were 2nd.
Really? Baylor.
4th. They were 4th, excuse me. Baylor's one of them. Houston's one of them. Cincinnati's the other one.
Okay.
Can I say something funny about Baylor, though? Now, I don't know why I just keep this going. Do you want to hear where Baylor's last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games have all been? Do you know
ESPN
this?
Plus?
ESPN Plus. They've played 5 straight games on ESPN Plus.
Well, I think that's what's funny about the FS1 stat is that like UCF was only the Villanova game on ESPN Plus, right? So
yeah, just one.
That's one of the things. Like they had the Boise State game that was on FS1, whereas that weekend, I don't know. I would imagine that some of the other newcomers had games on ESPN Plus. So
Cincinnati had 4 on ESPN Plus. Houston had 2. BYU and UCF were the only ones who did the minimum because everyone has to do one. So UCF and BYU were the UCF. FS1 just likes UCF. I don't know. I think that it's not great. Like you prefer UCF can get on better networks, but I think it's one of those things where they're pretty reliable for that like 300 to 500,000 range, and teams like Baylor aren't. So they've found a niche for themselves. It's not a niche they want, but it's one they have.
Is that 7 on FS1 and then 1 on FS2?
Yep, FS2 separate.
Oh wow. Okay.
UCF did 7 on FS1 and then 1 each on Fox, ABC, ESPN, ESPN Plus, and FS2.
FS2.
Yep, real channel. Turns out.
Yeah, it was easy. I'm glad I found it very easily because of YouTube TV, and I went on there, and it's one of the ones that was like starting soon, UCF Texas Tech. And I was like, good, I don't have to scroll all the way down for this because, yeah, I wasn't sure I'd ever seen it before. I don't know if I'd ever watched anything on FS2 in my life. So
I'm not. People think I'm joking. I'm not. I had no idea FS2 was a channel that existed. Whatever college football games have been broadcast there before this weekend, I guess I never even knew they were happening because I watch a lot of college football. Never heard of FS2.
yeah. All right. I think the other thing in the football news is bowl projections, and a lot of the sites have narrowed it down to two opponents for UCF, and it's the one UCF and Arkansas State, which is one that belonged to one of the ESPN writers had that one in the Camellia Bowl. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
I thought that was interestingly spelled. I thought Camellia only had one L. And then CBS has UCF, Arkansas State in the Cure Bowl still. So there was a Cure Bowl representative, I believe, at the Texas Tech game.
There was a Cure Bowl, and they weren't there for Texas Tech.
No.
I'm gonna warn you guys right now that when we start seeing this is when the wheeling and dealing is going on, and when you start seeing projections start to coalesce around bowls and opponents, it means they're hearing stuff. So I think it's time to wrap our heads around USF and Arkansas State as potential opponents.
So that's the other one. USF, the Action Network has UCF and South Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl. ESPN has one of their writers had that game, and 247 also had that as their prediction. So
if you with a straight face as a UCF fan tell me that you would rather have Arkansas State in the Cure Bowl than USF as a Gasparilla Bowl, I don't even know what to say to you. I really don't. Just an insane mindset at that point.
The other thing that was funny is when Brett McMurphy puts these out on the Action Network, he puts a spread, like I guess it's just a projected spread. And UCF was favored in that spread by 20 over USF.
Which maybe, but also how do you do the spreads account for like opt-outs? Because UCF will certainly have opt-outs in their bowl game.
I don't know. And I also wouldn't back UCF to cover that. Like I wouldn't confidently say, they're covering a 20-point spread against USF.
I will say USF is really bad. Like they're going to a bowl and that's great for them. Congrats. But that's really more a product of how terrible their schedule's been.
Well, they have to win this weekend too. But I think they're going to. They're playing
Charlotte,
I think.
Yeah, bear with me as I pull up their schedule. They are playing Charlotte. But I just want to point out that their wins this year that are allowing them to go to a bowl are FAMU, Rice, Navy, UConn, and Temple. They just played a lot of bad teams. They're not good. Like I don't think that
defense. Their defense stinks.
No, that team could not beat UCF if they played. I think it would be like one of the least competitive War on F4s in a while. Now the only way to look at it otherwise is if UCF has like way more opt-outs than I'm anticipating, which is possible. We don't know. There's always surprises. I can't even really venture a guess right now, but you never know.
I know John Rice Plumlee wouldn't opt out.
He won't opt out.
He just is not an opt-out guy.
My offensive worries would be Javon and Kobe. Defense, you're probably worried about Seliscar and Tremont Morris-Brash. I don't think Jason Johnson would. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have this conversation.
Like, what does Seliscar have to gain by opting out? I just don't. He hasn't done enough this year to.
No, he's not going pro.
Improve. Yeah, so I mean,
I assume
maybe he plays
Tremont
one last game.
We're way ahead of ourselves, and I'm waiting for the smart people to figure it out. But I'm assuming that Tremont is going to get drafted, right? That feels likely. Probably late round.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it depends on. I don't really know. I haven't looked at the draft classes yet for a lot of positions, but he does. I mean, he seems like he's had the production and the talent to do it, but.
This is unfortunately another year, though, where who else is getting picked up? You could make a case that maybe someone takes like a flyer on Javon, but I don't know. He feels like a UDFA guy to me.
I saw, and I mean, again, it's only one person. It's just someone I met at the Senior Bowl last year. He was tweeting about Javon Baker last week or 2 weeks ago, and he has no UCF ties. So like I was curious because I was like, oh, whoa, okay, like someone's maybe looking at, and I did think like. It depends on what RJ does. I think if RJ goes to the draft, I think he could get drafted.
I've told you this the other night. I've weirdly gaslit myself into believing that RJ is coming back. I don't know if he's come back for UCF. Could be another school, but I don't know. I'm curious. For some reason, I have no information. This is all based off vibes. I just feel like he might be coming back. I don't know.
What I told you was that I've accepted that he's gone, whether it's going to be to the draft or to another school. And if he does come back, then I'll be pleasantly surprised and very happy.
If he comes back, I'm adding like 2 wins to next year just for him being there and being something
do you remember that there was a mock draft like way early in the season that had DeCorian Patterson going in like the first round?
I was about to make that joke where of course DeCorian Patterson, which to DeCorian Patterson's credit, he's finally actually broken into the lineup over these last few weeks. But
then again, with the NFL, it's always weird because there's people that if you're projectable, then you might go in the late rounds. So we'll see. We'll see what UCF looks like.
You know who we should keep an eye on for draftability?
Who's that?
Corey Gamage.
Paul Rubelt? Oh. Corey.
Well rested after a full season of not playing or being on the depth chart, might be ready to take it to the next level. But
I guess, yeah, I kind of forgot about him because my whole theory or my whole like hope was
he
that
was
like,
gonna
oh
be
yeah,
amazing?
he'll play his way. He'll play his way into shape like halfway through the year, and then he'll break out down the stretch.
About that.
We've run out of time.
I'm
It's not
convinced
gonna
there's
happen.
something there we don't understand. You don't go from being 2 years being Marshall's leading receiver and really good and a big bodied receiver, and then you can't even crack the depth chart. I know there was like an injury at some point, but like there's something there we don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know. They murdered his career when both, was it Gus? I think was it Gus or Henshaw and JRP came out and was like, yeah, he's out of shape.
Yeah, they both said it. They both said
They were
it.
like fat. I was like, whoa, come on now.
Which it's so funny because like him and DeCorian were absolutely my 2 favorite additions. They were sort of later additions, and it was like, whoa, they just landed this DB out of the group of 5 who's really good, led the nation in interceptions. Yeah, 2 guys who were going to come in and start, and that was when I started getting really excited. Like maybe this could be like a 8-4 season. Like who knows? Just nothing. The portal misses were crazy this past year. I mean,
we don't
really
talk enough about
almost everyone
missing on every wide receiver.
How many? I mean, Whittemore like gets out there sometimes. I mean, how many wide receivers did they bring in, and just nothing from any of them?
It was 3, right?
They brought in Whittemore. They brought in Magwood, who opted out. I don't think we ever mentioned on the podcast. He opted out a few weeks ago.
I don't even think I knew that.
Yeah. Gus Ramley. Gus just volunteered that information in a press conference. I don't think he was asked about Magwood. Like they were like, "Coach, how'd the team play this week?" And he's like, "Well, Chauncey Magwood opted out, so it really impacts the game plan when wide receiver 9 isn't going to be available." But there was a third one, and I can't remember who they are now.
It was Gamage.
Gamage, right? We just talked about. Yes, they brought in Gamage, they brought in Whittemore, and they brought in Magwood. Wow, I'm having a hard time with this. And they are combined for like 3 catches, I think. So
that's what was the who's the one they ran off? I forgot where he ended up.
Christian Leary at Georgia Tech. Should I look up his stats really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know that, like, I don't remember if I looked up his stats. I know he had that game-winning touchdown, I think, a couple weeks ago, but I don't know that his stats are like crazy.
I have no idea what I'm walking into here. Christian Leary has 25 catches for 309 yards, 2 touchdowns.
It's a lot more than anyone on like UCF's.
21 more catches than Xavier Townsend's been the big mystery of the wide receiver room this year, because after that Kent State game, we kind of foolishly got really excited, and I think part of it is just because Kobe and Javon are really good, but
he got hurt.
And he got hurt for a while. He was out for a few games. But even when he has been playing, he's good for like 1 or 2 plays a game. That's kind of it. I don't know. Who's going to be, assuming Kobe and Javon leave, they don't have to. Everyone's just assuming they're going to. And I think that's a fair bet just based on like the way they are. I think that is Xavier Townsend. What?
No, it was just funny. Just when he said the way they are.
I didn't mean that as like an insult. It's just,
no, I know. It was funny the way he said it.
But is he wide receiver 1? They have to get transfers. I mean, they have to. Who's even coming up? Like Tyree Patterson? Yeah, they need transfers.
They do. They need transfers. See if they bring in. Oh, now I'm worried even more because their hit rate on transfer wide receivers is not great.
So going into next year, they potentially have what?
Still around?
I don't know.
I don't know. We got to do this.
Yeah.
This is
Let's just.
December
We're fine. We'll talk about this when they don't make a bowl and we have to fill 4 more episodes than we thought.
Talk about it when they do make a bowl, because we're still gonna have to wait probably 3 weeks until the Gasparilla Bowl against USF.
Yeah, when Whittemore's starting because Kobe and Javon opted out, we'll have more time to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into game of the week real quick. UCF women's basketball. They're currently 2-0 as we're recording this. They play tonight as we're recording this against Auburn, so they could be 3-0, 2-1 going into this end of the week. They're the Discover Puerto Rico Classic, and it's 3 games in 3 days. Thursday at 5 against Jackson State, Friday at 5 against St. John's, and Saturday at 7:30 against Sacred Heart. So some holiday basketball there for you, as hopefully UCF enters that tournament 3-0 if they can beat Auburn. But yeah, good start so far.
For sure.
And we'll move on to Tweet of the Week.
Tweet of the Week. This was a late edition. This Tweet of the Week was tweeted just 2 minutes before we started recording, but I want to thank the person who tweeted it for giving us something to talk about. So I tweeted earlier today a stat that I like a lot, and I texted it to you, and I said, like, this is the most copium thing I've ever seen in my life, because like just tweeting it made me feel like all warm and fuzzy inside. But we're 1 month today, as we're recording, we're 1 month away from early signing day, and UCF has 9 blue chip commits in the 2024 class. They all, knock on wood, major knock on wood there, they all seem to be mostly solid right now. On top of that, Eddie Pierre-Louis still has not made a decision. We're kind of waiting. Maybe UCF, who knows? Anyway, I pointed out that right now, UCF has as many blue chip commits in the 2024 class as Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Utah, Colorado, West Virginia, Baylor, Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati combined. I stick with it, guys. This is my number one thing to bring up when people say get rid of the staff is I don't think UCF fans can even comprehend how insanely stacked this class is. And what's really exciting to me is that one good class like this is great. If the staff can recruit like this every year, which it hasn't seemed like this is a fluky class, it seems like they're actually recruiting at this level. You do that 3 or 4 times, UCF is literally going to be more talented than almost any team on their schedule in the frickin' Power 5. I stick with it. But anyway, that's not tweet of the week. I would never give myself tweet of the week. I think I've done it before, but I wouldn't do it again. I got a reply right before we started recording from Sarasota USF at Sarasota USF. They replied to me with their 2009 class, which was ranked 25th in the nation, and said, we had the same type of class in 2009, and it too changed the program forever. Congratulations. It's going to be a great ride of never-ending success. So obviously a bit of sarcasm there from the sad bull. I just have to point out that a couple things there. One, USF's 2009 class I went and looked up. 247's ratings are calculated based on the talent in the class and also the size of the class. Their class was 4 4-stars and like 93 stars, and they got bumped up because of how many 3-stars they had. It wasn't a good class. UCF has more than twice as many blue chip commits in this class as USF did in 2009. So one, shout out to USF fans for still being more concerned about how UCF's recruiting than anything else. That's so on brand for them. I look forward to seeing them in the Gasparilla Bowl. But 2, what a dumb tweet. So I figured I'd throw that out there for us to talk about.
Nice. I appreciate it.
For sure.
I don't really have anything to say to that one, actually.
Just USF did not do well after 2009, but also with a class that's nothing like doesn't even remotely compare to the class UCF is bringing in right now.
Oh man, if that game happens, if that Gasparilla Bowl matchup comes to fruition, it'll be fun few weeks.
I don't get how you root against it, man. It's just fun. It's like I feel like I'm not doing the rant again because I just did it, but it's like we lose sight of what this is sometimes. It's supposed to be fun. It's college football. It's not supposed to be, oh well, you know, who gets what out of this and how does it impact whatever. It's like, I don't like USF and I enjoy watching UCF beat USF. I'd be down to see it again. So
and what's the alternative?
You really against it? Yeah, I want to go see Arkansas State. That's fun.
In our home stadium?
None of you are going to even go. It's going to be like a dead game in the bounce house. It's going to be a terrible visual. So no.
And then, it's me. No, I don't want that visual of no one in the bounce house for a bowl game. People are like, wow, UCF didn't even fill a stadium for a bowl game in their own stadium.
We made fun of USF for that in 2019 when they went to the Gasparilla Bowl. And then it's going to be us next. It's going to look like an Apollos crowd. I'm not doing it. No, thank you.
Oh man, remember the Apollos.
Never forget.
Well, I won't. Not anytime soon. All right, let's get out of here. Hopefully, the next time you and I talk on this podcast, we'll have a bowl game to look forward to.
We will.
Hope that's the case. Good luck with the post game podcast if there's not a bowl game in the future. But Christian will be back on Saturday with a post game podcast with episode 177. But until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at ByCA Simmons, and at Night Sports Now. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.